Hey folks, David Stewart here. It is time for some more music theory. Today we're going to be talking about melody. I've done all sort of the prep work to make you think about things in a conceptual manner. Now it's time to apply some of what we know and to actually hopefully create some music. Melody is one of the best places to start with that. Most of the time when you're writing music or when you're listening to music, what you're going to hear and what you're going to remember is the melody first and foremost. You're not really going to remember as well the things like chords. You're not going to remember rhythms because rhythms and everything are part of melody. It's the melody that we really tend to go away whistling, if you will, so that's a great place to start. I'd like to talk about three quick little terms that will relate to our writing of melody, and then I'm going to give you 4 guidelines for writing a melody, and then I'm going to give you an example of how to write a very simple single-line melody that should match up with some of the melodies that you've heard in the past and be appropriate for pretty much any style from the 17th century onwards. So the first term that I want to talk about is scale. Most of the time people think of a scale as a bunch of notes in a row, but that's not really what a scale is on a theoretical level. On a theoretical level, a scale is a representation of the notes in a key. So when you learn a scale, you're learning really all the notes in what's called a key. And when you practice a scale, I tend to have my students practice pretty outside that normal way of just going up and down the scale. I have them improvise with the scale. I have them do a bunch of different things with the scale. You can think of a scale as like a pool of notes for you to use, and that's a great way to think about it if you're improvising, if you're in the jazz, if you're playing jazz or you're playing metal or you're playing rock with a lot of improvisation in it. A scale is sort of a guide for what notes you can use in any given moment. A key relates to a scale in that it is a representation of all a scale is kind of a representation of all the notes in a key. A scale can also be a mode or things like that. But a key is a system of related pitches that establishes a tonic. If you go way back to like the first few videos that I did in this series, I started with a complex tone. We talked about all the overtones that were generated mathematically, all the intervals that are generated out of that. When you condense those down, you'll remember that I created a harmonic pitch collection. That's a key. So a key is a system of related pitches. We have 2 main what are called tonal systems. So the tonal system is composed of 2 main key areas. What's called a major key, which is what I exhibited with the complex tone, and a minor key, which is an altering of some of those relationships to favor a different fundamental. We're going to focus on the major keys, and we will get to minor keys somewhere in the future. Somewhere down the line, we'll get to minor keys. So key is a system. Keyword is system. System of related pitches that establishes a tonic. The tonic is really the main note in a key. Okay, a key is a system. Tonic's that main note in the key. It's the final note. When you're playing any sort of a melody, you're going to hear that tonic is the note that we finally resolve to. It's the resting place, is what I like to call it. It's the resting place. And if you're doing really old school modal music like old chant or something like that, the final, which is sort of synonymous with the tonic in that capacity, that's where you tend to rest when you're doing a chant. You rest on the tonic and what's called the dominant. We'll get into more of those terms and how they're going to apply to what we're doing probably in another lesson. Now, when it comes to writing melody, there's actually a couple guidelines that can help you create a very fluid and very memorable and very beautiful and effective melody, a melody that can evoke emotions. That's what our goal is here. We want to know what techniques we can use to communicate ourselves through music and what goes into making a nice, effective melody. Well, an effective melody usually follows these 4 guidelines. It does not have to, but I recommend that when you're learning something, you start with what's standard. You start with what's set and what people have done over the years, and then you go from there over to the things that are maybe non-standard and are different from what people did in the past, okay? So start with what is standard, and then you can start adding the non-standard things. Sometimes it's a really good idea to add like one little variation that's kind of non-standard, but it's a great place to start with like what people actually did, especially like in the 18th century. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to start and end on the tonic, okay, which is the main note in the key. We're going to write this particular melody in the key of C major. So here I've drawn a nice little staff semi-neatly. At the beginning of any piece of music, we need a couple of things, okay? we need a treble clef, or we're going to do this in treble clef. You need a clef of some kind. So we're going to do this in treble clef. Looks like that. You can do this in bass clef or whatever instrument you read in, if you want to be able to experiment with this melody and really play around with it. We need a time signature. I'm going to exhibit this in 4/4, but you can try other time signatures out as you want. And we need our key signature. We're going to do this in the key of C major. C major has no sharps, no flats, and the tonic of C major is, of course, C. The name of the key always expresses the tonic. Whether it's major or minor, the tonic will be the name of the key. So we're going to draw C right here. I'm going to draw it as a whole note for now, but I'm going to alter the rhythm as I go. So that's our first guideline. We want to start in on tonic. If you go back to that Somewhere Over the Rainbow, it starts on if I'm playing it in C, you can play it in any key, you know, play E flat. If we start on C, it starts and it ends on C. If you think of something like Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, it actually starts off the tonic, but it definitely ends on the tonic. So there's a couple of different ways that this can be expressed, but most of the time you're going to start and end on the tonic. This right away expresses what the tonic is and sets the listener up to hear a return to that first note. If you listen to like any John Williams score, like listen to Star Wars, you're going to see he starts on the tonic a lot with his themes, so that with the very first note of the melody, you know where it's going to return to, what that final note is going to be. The next one is stepwise motion is preferred. Okay, this is a guideline. It's not a rule. These are not rules. They're guidelines to be broken if you choose to. I probably misspelled preferred, but whatever. Stepwise motion is preferred, meaning most of the time you want to go around in steps. And what that means is, if you go back and if you were to draw a scale out as a bunch of eggs in a row, which some of you are probably familiar with, a bunch of notes that go in a row, most of the time we're going to want to go stepwise. We're going to want to go notes that are next to each other. If I go back to that Somewhere Over the Rainbow, that one's not a step. Right away in the first little bit there, it's mostly steps. And then you want a few leaps for the spice, what I call the spice of this. So you do want a few leaps, okay? And a leap is basically going from any note away, skipping over a note. That's a small leap. So Somewhere Over the Rainbow starts with a big leap up from tonic to tonic to the seventh, which is a distantly related tone. Slight rest on the dominant. Seven. And resolves by a very small leap down to the tonic. So I like to think that the steps are kind of what keeps you centered and keeps you in the key and understanding where the tonic is. And the leaps are those dramatic parts. So you think Somewhere Over the Rainbow has a really, really dramatic leap all the way up to an octave, which is big. And the bigger the leap, the more dramatic it is, until a certain point where the leap is so big that you tend to not connect the two. So once you start to get past an octave or a tenth, the leaps start to sound a little bit disconnected from each other. So the steps are kind of like the spice. If you can imagine music as a hamburger, the bun is like the chords, the harmony that's holding it all together. The meat is your melody. That's the important part, right? A hamburger without meat ain't much of a burger. But a hamburger with just meat and just a bun may be a little bit boring for most of you. So the leaps and all the other stuff that you do, all the expressions, that's the spice. I like to think the leaps are the spice that you put on the burger to make sure that it doesn't taste bland. That's the leap. So we're going to have a few leaps. Our third guideline is we're going to have a climax tone. And we're going to have one of those rather than a bunch. Okay. So a single climax tone means you have one note that ends up higher than all the others. Somewhere Over the Rainbow actually breaks a little bit of a guideline of a traditional melody in that it has its climax tone as the second note in the melody, which is why it's so sad. So it jumps up very, very high and longingly to the tonic and goes down to a dissonant note, the major seventh, before we get to the climax tone. And then from there, it's just falling down and down and down to the tonic. So we get our climax tones. This one actually has two, but we get it really early on. Most of the time, you're going to want that climax tone between 2/3 of the way and 3/4 of the way. 3. Between those two, think of like the golden mean. That's about when climax tones will occur. If you were to get a bunch of Mozart and Beethoven melodies out, you'd find that high note in the melody is going to be, bam, right on like the golden mean, somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4. That's where they tend to have that high note, because that's when we're able to experience the biggest amount of tension, and we still have the most room to slowly resolve that tension. So a climax tone tends to be, by the way, in case you didn't figure out from my terminology, a high note. Now, it doesn't have to be a high note. It can also be a low note. So if you have a melody that goes down and then up, the climax tone can be a low note. The other thing is the climax tone can be a loud and longer note. So it tends to be a little bit longer and it tends to be a little bit higher than the other notes. And we want it to stand out and be memorable as the highest note or the lowest note of your melody. If you just keep going up to the same note, the melody tends to not feel like it's moving forward. We're not adding tension anymore and resolving it. We're simply going around in circles, and the listener will get bored. So you do want one climax tone. And the phrase is usually going to be multiples of 4. Okay, it does not have to be, but it almost always is in most music. Multiples of 4. Only in people that consciously avoid trying to do things that are really traditional do you get melodies that really aren't 4 measures. They're around, but most of the time it's a multiple of 4. Sometimes with the 5th measure to resolve the melody before the next phrase begins, but usually multiples of 4. If you go and you listen to EDM music, you'll hear what I call the law of 4, which is that every 4 measures you're going to hear something new added, something changed, so that the piece just sort of like continually evolves. Every 4 measures something new happens, keep that energy up and that sort of stuff. And we do the same thing actually in classical music. We tend to have every 4 measures tends to constitute either a phrase or a subphrase, some unit of what we're hearing. If we were to play Beethoven, that's one phrase. The second phrase, 4 measures. And those two phrases go together. The first one does end on the tonic. The second one does, to make one big long phrase that starts and ends on tonic. So the phrase is usually multiples of 4. So we're going to write a 4-measure phrase. We're going to start and end on the tonic. So I can just write the tonic over here again as a last note. And we're in 4/4, meaning 4 beats of 4 quarter notes each. So if I were to write a melody here, I'm going to start with a C. Okay, I'm going to start with a C as a quarter note. And then I'm going to maybe do some eighth notes that go up. I'm going to start wanting to go up. Okay, we want melodies to ascend, because as they ascend, we tend to get tension. Or you could also do it in reverse. They could go down. But most of the time, we're going to go up and then back down. We're going to have a nice, like, arc that goes like this. So the arc, the idea of an arc shape is important. And maybe I'm going to go back down to D here. And then maybe I'm going to leap. I'm going to do a leap here. Maybe up to A. A nice, strong leap. And whenever we do a leap, we actually like to resolve leaps in the opposite direction. This is a fun little trick. We want to resolve it in the opposite direction. So we're going to go to a G, and maybe I'm going to make that a dotted quarter note G. And I'm going to play another G here. I promise you I'm making this up on the spot. So if it turns out really bad, you know why. Maybe I'll have a little ascending run here, like this. And now we're at the 3rd measure out of 4. And we're going to want to do something here to sort of get up to a climax tone. Now I'm going all the way up to the 7th. So in this 3rd measure, I'm actually going to go back down, because I kind of want to milk it, back down to an A. And I'm going to leap down to an E, up to an F as eighth notes. And then I'm going to go to G, and then I'm going to leap up to a C like this. I'm going to tie it over to an eighth note here, and then I'll have it leap all the way down to E as another eighth note. I'm breaking these eighth notes up, but you normally wouldn't do this. You normally have them like flying together like that. And then maybe I want this to end on a quarter note. Let me extend it out just a bit. I tend to just really use up a lot of space to write melodies. And I'm going to go up to F. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, 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 bum. Bum. And I'm going to put a double bar here. And equalize. So there's our melody. Notice I go up here. Does it start and end on tonic? This needs to be a C. We'll make this a C, like that. Starts and ends on tonic. Check, check. Okay. Does it stepwise? Mostly stepwise. Couple leaps. Check. We have a climax tone about 3/4 of the way through. Check. Phrase, multiples of 4. Check. Let's hear what this one sounds like. I'm going to play it down an octave from where it's written, because that's the way guitar music is read. More or less, that's what it is. Okay, so that's not too bad a melody. Goes up, has a nice strong climax tone right here. Has a nice arc shape that goes kind of up like that and over. Kind of like plot, kind of like a story. So each melody tells a little story where we build up the tension, we think we resolve it, then we go up and we crank it up at the end, and then we find a quick way to resolve it and get back down. If I wanted to build a multi-part melody, I could simply end this not on tonic. I can end it on D like in the Beethoven I demonstrated. And then I could have the next measure maybe start the same and then end on C, and then I've created a 2-phrase period. If you remember our organizations of rhythm, those 2 phrases might go together and create one longer bit of melody by removing our resolution right here at the tonic and putting it off till the next phrase. So that's something that we can do. I urge you to try writing some melodies, try writing some out, try playing them on your instrument, following these guidelines, see what you come up with. Remember to vary the rhythm. This is maybe our hidden 5th rule over here, is to vary the rhythm. If the rhythm has no variance to it, if the rhythm's really static, it's going to be incredibly boring. Don't be boring, okay? Don't ever bore your audience. So at least vary the rhythm. Try quarter notes and eighth notes and half notes. There's no half notes in here. It's all just different eighth notes and quarter notes. But try that out. See what you come up with. If you are looking to do this on a notation program and you don't own one yet, there's a couple of options. One is Finale Notepad, which is free from Make Music, or Avid, I think, owns it now. Actually, no, I think Avid owns Sibelius. Scratch that. So there is Finale Notepad, which you can use on Windows and I believe Mac, and that's free. If you're running on like a Chromebook or something like that, you can use flat.io. It's a web-based score writing program that's pretty decent. I have my students use it because they have no other options, but it's actually pretty good and it integrates pretty well with most other things. Of course, they lock off a lot of stuff for you if you're not going to pay the monthly subscription, but even if you do it for free, there's still a lot of access that you can do, and you can still create as complex a score as is possible. You just maybe won't have access to all the instrument patches that are available, or maybe you won't have access to something like Hyperscribe. So thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I hope that this has been informative. Please let me know what your thoughts are down below and what you want to see or hear. And if you want to support me, feel free to buy a book and check out my websites, davidvstewart.com, dbspress.com, and I'll see you guys next time.